The single biggest piece of evidence that UFOs are visiting our world is wrapped up in one mysterious event: the Ariel school UFO incident. The craft was seen by more than 60 children, was confirmed by a Harvard professor, newspaper interviewers, and parents alike, and was so well documented it had more than a decade of follow-up info afterwards. There have been many claims of UFO sightings and bizarre creature encounters by people around the world, but few have been able to prove it. Now, though, in this episode of Metaphysical, we'll talk about the strongest case yet, with exactly what the kids saw, what implications the UFO encounter had globally for generations to come, what may have just been a manipulation tactic, and what seemed fully and bizarrely real. Join me, investigative researcher Rob Counts, and remote viewer John Vivanco for a metaphysical show that's out of this world.
And if you're listening to this metaphysical podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or anywhere else, that 5-star rating and review, it really, really helps us, and we truly appreciate it. So also remember, you've got to like, you got to follow, and you got to subscribe on YouTube, Rumble, X, and Facebook.
John, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing good. How about yourself?
Yeah, good. I'm excited for this episode. For those of you at home, after you've heard the intro, but we're going to be talking about the Ariel school UFO landing today, which is, I have to say, probably one of the most the biggest pieces of evidence we have that UFOs are visiting our world, probably wrapped up in this one event. It's very, very well documented by a lot of really heavy hitters, I think, in that have given it credibility over the years. So many different people having seen this thing landed. We're going to go over some of the details really quick, just to kind of get you guys on board, or to remind you, if you've already heard of this, what exactly happened. So this is September 16th, 1994, in Ruwa, Zimbabwe. And there is a UFO sighting with 62 children between ages 6 and 12 years old. All saw a craft land in a field right near their school. They all ran over there. Two beings got out, approached the children, telepathically communicated with some of them. Now, the Ariel school is not just any old school. This was a very expensive, well, not very expensive, but an expensive private school where there were people of all different races going to this school. 2 days before the incident, there were also other UFO sightings in southern Africa. Some people saw a fireball in the sky at night, and the entire event at the Ariel school lasted about 15 minutes while the adults were all inside having a teacher's meeting. Very soon after the incident, the BBC interviewed children and staff. This was just 3 days later. And the correspondent who went was a war correspondent, a very seasoned war correspondent named Tim Leach. And listening to him talk on all of the different interviews, even some documentaries, was some of the most interesting footage regarding this, because he was so blown away. You're talking about a seasoned war correspondent who understands what a story takes in order for it to have credibility. And he's constantly sending stuff after sacrificing his life in all of these different war scenarios. He's sending stuff to and from the BBC, knows what he's talking about, knows what he's doing.
The other thing, that this guy was a total skeptic. Like,
Total
he
skeptic.
never thought about this stuff, never believed in it when he did hear about it. So he was a total skeptic.
Total skeptic, and this actually kind of shell-shocked him more than anything he had seen in war, because you have all of these innocent children who would not be able to organize themselves in such a fashion to be able to consistently lie. And the story throughout the years over the last, I mean, however long this is, like 30 years, has not changed.
Could you tell me what you saw on Friday?
Well, it looked like it was like glinting in the trees. Like it looked like roundabout like a disc, like a round.
Are you sure it
Yeah.
wasn't a Harrier jump jet or
No,
something that the Zimbabwe Air
it
Force
was
had
like
got?
in a disc.
At all. I mean, the story has stayed consistent, right? Um, Even after this, a local UFO researcher went and visited 4 days after the event. So this is right after, like, on the coattails of Tim Leach here, and she had children draw pictures of what they'd seen, and they all told her basically the same story, which she found to be nigh impossible unless something had actually happened, right? Now, a month or two after the event, a Harvard professor named John Mack, this is probably one of the heaviest hitters that could have been involved. John Mack was a
He ran
psychiatry
the
professor.
psychology department at Harvard.
Psychiatry or psychology?
I think it was
Psychiatry, I think.
psychiatry. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, which is actually psychology is even, I would say, even more open to these things than even psychiatry, because psychiatry is a little bit more regimented, I found, right?
Right. Right.
More about, fixing problems rather than, trying to get in there and work them out to some
Right.
extent.
Exactly. And I mean, Mac, like, you think about this guy and you think about John Mack and how he got into this type of phenomena because he was a skeptic. I mean, he was a skeptic when not at the Ariel place at that point. He was an open-minded skeptic in that he had heard about the abduction phenomena and was, what's this about? What is this, a new like mental aberration? Like, how do we study this? Because there are a lot of people claiming this stuff. So let's get some of these people in. Let's take a segment and find out, what is this mental illness that's happening here with these people, right?
They don't claim they've been taken by aliens anyways. They're very reluctant to come forward with their stories. The stories that they were telling consistently, as I began to meet with these people myself, there was nothing in my psychiatric work over 40 years that prepared me for the consistency of these stories, the fact that they're told by children as young as 2 years old with physical marks, cuts, scoop marks, and the rest, the association with UFOs, and that these are not people who are mentally ill. And there's nothing in my background that prepared me for this set of experiences.
Yeah, he opened the doors to allowing people to start talking about this to try to heal whatever it was, which is a totally normal, I think, academic thing to do, to be
It's
quite
a
honest.
responsible thing to
It's a
do. Yeah.
correct. If there's thousands of people, even hundreds of people who are suffering from something like this, as a doctor, you're under oath to try to help these people. And most doctors shy away from this type of thing for fear of criticism. And John Mack certainly received his share of criticism for many, many years. I mean, being involved in Harvard with all of those other professors who feel like his studying this is bringing the name of the school down and all of that. I mean, these are all things that John was having to deal with, and he handled it immaculately. I mean, amazingly,
Well, they after this event, they investigated him and removed him from the head of the department,
Right.
but then later apologized and reinstated him.
Yeah, they even moved his office off
Right.
of
Off
campus to
campus.
a
Yeah.
separate place that he had to walk to, and then I think as the, what was it? As the management, I guess you could say, in Harvard changed, and there was someone else, kind of being appointed as head of these different departments. There was a kind of a formal apology given to him, because their take on it was any academic professor should have the right to fail, meaning the right to look into something that other people haven't looked into in order to do whatever it is that you're doing, innovate, whatever. And I think they genuinely felt like that was his business, that it was okay for him to do that. There was something here to be looking at, that we should not be shying away from these things. We should instead be embracing them, especially if people have this problem. And this is from the psychiatry perspective, not from the, hey, this crap is really going on
Right.
perspective, Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's an interesting thing to me, how they would how it's mostly would mostly just be brushed under the carpet. Many people talking about this stuff, yet most people are completely afraid to touch it in
Yeah.
case it's real. In case it's find out it's real, you're going to wreck your career, you're going to lose funding, you're going to lose your job, and so they get scared away from touching this kind of stuff. But that man had balls, I tell you.
Huge,
Yeah,
huge nads.
yeah.
I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah, and that's something to be appreciated, no matter what conclusions he came to, right?
or
Whether
what
anybody
conclusion,
believes him or not.
right? No matter what conclusions anyone at
Right,
home came to, he went against the grain in the hardest place to do that. And this
right.
is why science is the way that it is because we have so many people that and you can watch some documentaries where they're interviewing some of these Harvard professors who are very against what John Mack was doing, and they're just it's so hard to listen to them
They're
because
smarmy. Smarmy is the word.
it's a good word for it, man. That's like the
Yeah,
perfect word for it. Yeah, it's downright annoying. But anyway, so John Mack goes there, interviews the kids, and his take home from the entire investigation after going to Zimbabwe and talking to these kids is that no, there's something going on here. These kids saw or experienced something, and this needs professional. There should be some professional help given.
right,
He didn't see them as lying. He knew they weren't lying, even if all of them somehow, hive hallucinated the same thing. Even if that was a part of this, that still needed to
right,
be looked at
right, right.
in his professional opinion.
Right. Well, now, if he would have come back, well, from any of these investigations, he did a lot of hypnotherapy. I
True.
don't think I don't, if he did that on the Ariel students, it was probably off to the side. But he did a lot of hypnotherapy in general on people who claim to be abducted. And if he would have come back with the body of work that he had and said, well, this is a mental distortion or an aberration, if he had come to a conclusion that fit with the way mainstream wanted it to go, then he would have been held in the highest accolades by the university system, by the authorities and whatnot. But he did not do that. In fact, he believed that these people were interacting with something otherworldly.
Haley, you something scared you, is that right?
Yes.
What scared you?
The noise.
What noise?
The noise that we heard in the air.
He did.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the only conclusion you can come to. Even that guy Tim Leach came to this conclusion, is like, hey,
Right.
no, how could all of these people be telling the same story, straight faced? And kids, like, at that age, yes, you can always tell if there's a few kids making something up. When all of them are telling the same story, they're not lying. You can tell when they're lying, you
Right.
know. And I mean, this was some crazy stuff. These children claimed they were receiving telepathic warnings and communications about the environment, and that people were harming the world through technology. These beings, they said, they were urging them not to get too technological, and that the world might end because we're not taking care of the planet. Now, caveat to this is, when the kids were asked and pressed if this was related to climate change or any of that kind of what you might call an agenda, they were like, no, that's not it. That's not what they were saying. They were saying that humans could destroy themselves, destroy the environment. It didn't have anything to do with something that was more of a human kind of concept of why we should fix these, or any of that kind of stuff,
Yeah, right. What was the message? The message was along the lines of be careful with technology, or
Yes.
or your use of technology is going to end up as a very destructive path, something along that line. And that's quite a common theme in the abduction. Not all of them, but that is a theme in abduction scenarios.
His reason for visiting Earth.
I think it's about something that's gonna happen.
Something that's going to happen.
Yes.
Like what?
There's pollution or something.
Pollution?
Yes.
And how did he get that idea of pollution across to you?
The way you're staying.
The way he was staring?
Yes.
I mean, I've told you this story before. Like back in the day with the old company that I was with, Transdimensional Systems, when
Yes.
the remote viewing think tank, and we had this gray alien that would show up. I mean, this is just like crazy remote viewer talk, but
Sure.
we had this gray alien that would show up and give messages on a regular basis, specifically to one person in the company, and the messaging, literally, like a bunch of the messaging was literally around how our pursuit of technology is going to actually completely destroy the planet that we live on. It's going to destroy it. And we have to like step back from that and go back into more of a heartbeat of the earth to understand things, to move the species forward, as opposed to understand things completely, totally through technology. So this is common. This is something that shows up, and this is some kind of messaging that, comes through this whole construct.
Yeah, I mean, it would seem like a common sense thing we should already know, and yet, you know, they felt the need, it seems, to have to tell us that. And now, getting a little bit into what these kids actually saw and kind of the bizarre weirdness around this UFO encounter. So as we said, John Mack is on the scene, and we're going to kind of go through some of the things that the children said as he was interviewing them. So again, John Mack, this guy won a Pulitzer Prize, right? And he's written books on alien abductions. Now, again, John has died now. In 2004, he was killed. He was hit by a drunk driver in London in 2004. Now, the footage from 1994 when he went there, it sat on a shelf for, man, quite a long time. I think it was like 10 years at least. And his friend, who's a research assistant, kind of took up the project again after his death. They even went back to Zimbabwe with the original camera woman, and they interviewed some of the same people Mac had interviewed back in 1994 when he went. Now, this was said in, I believe it was a Boston Sunday Globe article, that, quote, "The consistency of the interviews with these young children, that's what impressed me," said an independent filmmaker, Mac's friend, who was dating his sister named Nickerson. He joined the project after Mac's death. Now, some of the things that the kids said was that whatever they saw come out of this UFO, they seemed to have stiff necks. One little girl told Mac, matter of factly. Okay. Someone said, "He was just staring at me as if he wanted to come and take us. It's definitely reality," said a third. "We know what we've seen." Now, some of the kids were really, really, really messed up from this experience. They had families who were not accepting of what these kids saw. One girl from a very strong Christian family named Emily Trim. She was this redheaded girl featured in the documentary. What was this documentary called that we watched?
Ariel Phenomena.
Ariel Phenomena. That's right.
Yeah.
Ariel Phenomena. She just didn't feel like she could talk to her family because her parents held such strong Christian beliefs, and that this was not possible, looked down on, et cetera, et cetera. It really, really, really hurt her for a really long time that she couldn't share because it was so massively life-changing what they saw. and each of the kids had somewhat of a different experience with what they were seeing. Some kids saw two aliens that were bald with big eyes. Some children saw that one of the aliens had long black hair. Um, they Some of the children saw almost as if like they were stuck in time somehow, that there were these weird time glitches going on during the UFO landing where they could see these aliens like walking, and then it would almost be like they were shifting back and forth, and then all of a sudden they would be in front of them and communicating with them. And these are children trying to describe this, right? There's some interesting stuff here that was said. Then we heard a high pitched frequency. Then we saw a flash and the craft. And it's really hard to describe time at this point. So I don't know how long all this happened. All I can tell you is that two beings were hopping around the site, kind of like what we were just saying, right? They were curious, they were touching the ground, but they were almost like mimicking us, and all of a sudden they were in front of us at arm's reach, and we were frozen, and telepathic images started going across my face. It was communication through the eyes. That's all I can describe it as. And this is where the messages came in. What do you think about that, John?
You mean the it's like how they had different versions but the same thing
Yeah, and then
generally.
even yes, and then even these kind of weird time glitches that are happening. I mean, have you ever heard of this in any other encounters that you're aware of?
Well, I mean, just with remote viewing in general, like sometimes when we remote view a craft, like a reported craft or a video of one of these things, there's this effect of when you go into this field of the craft, there's a dimensional thing. Like the craft can look from the outside to be like 12 feet by 7 feet, right? 12 feet long, 7 feet wide, like 10 feet tall, something like that. And but when you go inside, it's like expansive, it's huge, it's mind-bogglingly
That's
huge.
crazy.
Then when you get to the gray alien side, which that's what they're describing here, and the abduction-y type scenarios, there's this thing where they enter your mind, your consciousness construct, and they manipulate it, or they interfere with it, or they're able to cause your perception to shift and change in ways that are like that or unexpected, where one person can have one view of the event and another person can have the same view, but there's details that are different, or there's different movements, or this or that. And that's like literally, from in my estimation, based on data, that's literally, that part has to do with how they enter into the minds of people and
The
begin to,
telepathic
yeah,
sort of.
part of the whole telepathic construct is part of the intensity that they have of being able to move into someone else's mind to even make them forget, things.
Oh,
So,
sort of like Men in Black stuff with the little
right.
pen thing that they
Sort
have.
of like that, but it's like when the normal average person hears about that aspect, they start to wonder, well, since everything doesn't line up exactly between witnesses, there must be fakery going on here with the kids, right?
Mm.
But it's the construct of these beings that creates that situation, and not the kids making anything up.
Hmm. One question I think anyone looking at this with skepticism would have is, why choose to visit children? Why? Why? I mean, you could have visited anyone with this message. You could have visited very important people. You visited a small private school in Zimbabwe, and you touched the lives of, a number of children. How many was it? 62 children that saw this event, and some of them, it changed their life for the forever. They're still, I mean, poor girl Emily Trim was highly, highly, highly affected by this. I mean, before she passed away, she herself passed away about 5 years ago, I think, from some type of cancer or something, unfortunately. But she had serious PTSD from this thing. I mean,
I think she passed away last year. It was last year,
was it
wasn't
was
it?
it
Not
that
5 years ago. That
was that
documentary
recently?
just came out, right?
She did, yeah, you're right. She died in 2024, I think. But yeah, total PTSD from this event. I mean, very, very seriously affected by this. You can tell that it had kind of, she was finding some healing. Her parents had started to open up, talking to her about the situation. All of her artwork revolved around this. She was an artist. She had come forward and put her work up in a few galleries to kind of show and share about this whole
Mhm.
thing. Why kids? Why do you think they would choose to do this so kind of what seems like in an unorganized way?
Yeah, let's start breaking some of this down, because we have remote viewing data on this, and the reason why this happened as well. Now, like when we get to the incident and what occurred there, normally when we go into these things, it's like we look at this to understand first off if it's real or not real. Of course, it's real. I mean, there are all these witnesses. The kids all saw this happening. This did happen. This did actually happen. And so remote viewing data on that is not particularly revealing just because the story is more revealing than what the remote viewing data on the physical side, right, is going to give us, on the physical side. Now, but when we get into the this idea of like, well, what you're asking, why there? Why with all these kids? This
Yeah.
doesn't seem to compute for me. Why not go, land at the White House or the government or the scientist's backyard, right? Something like that. But you have to look at what the messaging is. What message did the kids put out that the aliens told them? Well, it had to do with how we interact with the world around us. It had to do with our technology. It had to do with the potential destruction of the planet, right? So that's the messaging. And this is going into impressionable minds. Right? This is going into these kids' minds. And that messaging, it literally grows with the children as they get older. Right? This is like tapping directly into the superconscious, the subconscious of the human race by giving this type of messaging to small impressionable children, because forever now they will be thinking about that and how they deal with technology, how they deal with the world around them, and see how we pollute like mad, how we destroy Earth like mad, and don't seem to care too much. So that's what it was all about. Literally, when we look into that aspect, it's about putting this into the minds of these children so that that messaging grows inside of them
Mm.
and in the subconscious of the human race.
Mm.
Um, so really, that's ultimately what it comes down to. And you also have to think of this like, why South Africa? I mean,
Yeah.
at least for people who live maybe in Europe or the United States, they just think South Africa. Come on, they're not as special and important as us where we are. And so it's one of those ideas that people would have. It's like, oh, it's a backwater kind of place. Why would it even go there? You know, that's got nothing to do with it. What people
Yeah.
think or don't think.
Right.
It is like raindrops across the planet. This same messaging has shown up in the United States, shown up in Netherlands, shown up in Europe, shown up in China, shown up in Japan, shown up South America. The same messaging by the same group of beings. It's drops, drop, 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 and that's one of the drops. Because whether we want to admit it to ourselves or not, like this type of stuff will seep into the underlying collective consciousness of people in general, especially when you're giving that messaging to children, to small children. So really, when you get down to it, yeah, it happened. There's nothing I can add on that with remote viewing. And that part about why they did it is just very small. Like that's literally it. There's not much else to it than that.
They just did it because they wanted to plant the idea into people's minds across the planet.
And look what we're doing with it now. Like there's like people are really focusing on this this documentary. They're focusing on what happened there as this proof, right? This proof of what went on. And
you think that's maybe a part of the plan was that they give just enough hope to like hope is I'm not sure if that's the right word for it, but just enough evidence to human beings to know that there is something else out there. I mean, there is this part of it too where, I mean, we don't always have great abduction stories with gray aliens. These aliens seem to be wanting to help for some reason. What's the I mean, you and I have
no,
discussed this
that's
before,
like
but
that's
what's
the whole thing. Like that is probably the same contingent. I mean, I do know that some of them look they're okay, so they're gray in form, right? That's a common form for one thing out there. Like humans are a common form out there, but for some reason we've flipped that, and now all we focus on is these super alien looking species as opposed to the human ones,
Mhm.
because for whatever reason that got pulled back or out. But this contingent, even in the abductions, would give that type of messaging. Like one abduction, they would be taking eggs. The next abduction, in that same individual, they would be showing them on a screen how humans are destroying the earth. Right? They have a direct vested interest in the earth staying pretty clean, right? So they would do this messaging. That's all part of this whole construct.
So you don't see this as some of them are evil, some of them aren't that bad.
No, they are doing what they're doing for themselves. They don't have the same emotional capacity
Yes.
and feeling capacity that we have. So they don't think it matters. They're just going to do what they do, no matter how much fear that brings in us, no matter how much pain that brings inside of us, because they are just trying to get something done. It's like, sorry, like you're the one that has the problem.
That's how you think that's how they view it.
It's not even a sorry. It's just like, what's that screeching sound? That emotional, is that emotion? That screeching sound is emotion.
So they're almost robotic then
Well,
emotionally in
some
how
of them
they
are. Some of their actual bio robots, like that. And so the whole genetic program, like I've said before, DNA and genetics for these species is like cash in the bank. This is a really, really important factor for a lot of species out there. And we were like, they were pulling it out and depositing it from us. It's not that they don't have a spiritual, like deep connection to God, whatever you want to call it, like everything. It's not that they don't have that. They just have a different construct that is
total different paradigm.
Yeah, completely different. And they are what we would call, or some of them at least, are very spiritual, but they lack this emotional empathy thing that we have.
Yeah, it's interesting and hard as a human being to understand. I think for a lot of people, it's hard to understand. And then for the skeptics and people who just don't believe in these things to begin with, they have even less of an ability to kind of process something like this. From everything that I've seen and from us looking at a lot of these different cases together, it would seem that genetic material is extremely valuable. universally speaking, out there in general. Whereas we're always looking at trying to create the next best synthetic thing. To them, that's easy. That's not very much. What they're really interested in is genetic material, and human beings seem to be of interest to them. Some type of just very valuable, not even currency. Like I think they need it somehow, right?
Well, yeah, that's like the story. Yeah, that's the story that they've put out that they give. Yeah,
Okay,
I
that's
don't
the
believe it.
story. You don't believe it? What do you believe?
I believe that it's currency and that they can create new and different species with that, and investigating like unique genetic signatures and isolating those to put into other species to put inside themselves. The story, more or less, that's given to humans is the story of um, our race is dying and we need your help because we're you from the future,
Yeah, yeah,
and
that I don't
so we
believe at
need
all.
to get your genes. It's a sad situation for us.
Yeah, it's like
That's
injecting.
another
Yeah,
no, no,
like
no, 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 that's
yeah,
not it.
that's like they need to inject themselves with their previous civilization's stem cells in order to heal themselves or
Right, right,
something.
right. That's not a
um,
thing. That's not
I
a
don't buy
thing.
that at all. Yeah,
No,
no.
no, it's
It
not.
would make way more sense that they're using it as currency to create new species or whatever else to me.
Yeah,
I could see their bodies getting so jacked up and messed up from constantly tweaking their genetic code that they need that material in order to patch that sometimes, but
right.
that would be it, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's that whole marijuana leads to heroin thing. Like they blew it. Now they're addicted to our genetics.
That's such a great way to
Yeah.
put it.
But it's like, for the most part, that whole thing stopped. For the most part, I'm not saying this doesn't go on.
Right.
It stopped en masse. Like it was in a period of time. It was within in a period of
Yeah,
time
like the 60s or even 50s to like the 80s, there was
to
like
the
a lot of
80s.
this.
Yeah, yeah. That's when most of it was happening.
Why? Is it like they're done, they harvested enough, or is it like they got hammered for trying to move in too fast and furiously on human beings? I mean, there
Well,
was a lobby around it.
if you think about it, it's like, okay, so how could you? It's estimated. I think you've got maybe 70 to 80% of at least people in the United States have been abducted, right?
Is that, I mean, that's our numbers.
No,
We're
I mean that's our numbers, but yeah,
yeah.
this is a remote viewing data information leads that direction. That this is a truthful statement.
That's an extremely,
Okay,
extremely high percentage.
right. It's an extremely high percentage, and you think about, well, even if this was like a 10-year period, 20-year period where people were getting abducted, it would take armies and armies and armies and armies of these beings to abduct that many people to test them to find out if there's anything in those people that they needed. And then it would go into, if somebody had something they needed, then it would go into this more long-term program. Now you have to think about the technology, you have to think about these beings and how they can go into the upside down and that type of technology.
Mm.
So literally having that type of technology where time doesn't exist, because we've often seen this with these beings, is
Mm.
that they work and operate in this realm where time doesn't exist and then it does exist. They can literally just keep looping back and looping back and looping back till they finally get all the stuff they need within a very short period of time. Right? Right. So from my estimation, they've pretty much gotten everything that they've needed or wanted out of this. And, there are those that are lingering and those that are even mimicking them that look similar, that have darker agendas, even darker
Mm.
agendas. So,
Yeah. One of the things that I one of the theories that I had when I was listening to the kids describe the weird kind of time slips or something that were happening when the aliens had exited the craft and were approaching the children, and how almost dreamlike and weird that was, is I wondered if this wasn't just a telepathic thing, but that there was also had something to do with the technology on the craft, because we're talking about these technologies uh, surrounding itself with almost a different dimensional space in order to
Right.
fly and operate. And then if you enter into that dimensional space, all of a sudden time can do all kinds of funky things. I mean, we're talking about a type of electromagnetics that is altering, or maybe even gravity, you could say, that's altering, almost creating wormholes where you're going, getting you potentially into the upside down, like you said, and then that's having an effect on everything around it. And then, I mean, it disturbed me a lot when I heard that Emily Trim passed away from some type of cancer, because I wondered if it was interacting with this technology that somehow led to that. I mean, of course, that's a lot of speculation. It just super strange,
It could. I mean, there are stories of people who have gotten cancer, who have come in contact with the fields of some of these craft and have gotten cancer. They've gotten sunburned. I mean, look at Close Encounters of the Third Kind movie, where like
Mhm.
they're sunburned on one side of their face, and in real events, that has happened, and that's where Steven Spielberg took that from. That happening to people, and people have turned up with cancer around these events. And I totally get what you're saying around the mental effery with the individuals and how it turns dreamlike. And there are so many things going on here. Like it's a totally valid point when you talk about the craft being able to create this kind of stuff. That just the breaking of linear mental constructs is what happens within the gravitational fields of these craft. And then you also, like you said, have to wonder. It's like, could this have just been projected into their minds from afar and no craft even landed? No, I mean,
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things too, is if you're seeing all of this bizarre skipping around and stuff, did the craft even land,
right. No,
But
I mean, we get that there was a physical incident there, that
you did.
it did land. Yeah. 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 We get that. But yeah, I understand exactly where you're coming from, because I've had that question too, not just with me, like in things that I've experienced, but with other stories that I've heard.
Right. And I'm curious to know, what is your take here on some of the children? Okay, this is weird. Like, some of the children saw figures with no faces. None. Just a
Right.
bald head, no face, and maybe telepathic communication. Some of them saw, what you'd consider the classic gray alien, large head, big black eyes.
But it was the eyes that made him.
So that kind of shape, I think the eyes were obviously a lot more fluid, round, shiny, protruded.
Almost like rugby balls or American footballs. Huge eyes on the side of his face.
Some saw some of those figures with this long black hair.
Right.
What's the deal with the black hair? Were these hybrid aliens that were
No,
somehow
like
crossed with
I
humans?
honestly I don't think that these were true, like, perceptions of a physical manifestation that they had. Like, okay, so just because how do I put this? Okay, I've seen I've seen aliens, like, just straight up, like, physically in front of me. That looks so different than me that my body and my psyche has a really adrenaline filled fight or flight
Yeah.
fear sensation that that it has the potential to mask things, my own mind,
Mm.
because this is something that is so different. We're used to other humans that are smart speak to us, are a communication thing going on between you and I, or me, or anyone else, and we're used to that. It's fine. We know the pattern, we know the faces, we know how people move, right? Where do we ever experience in our lives a intelligent, conscious construct that looks different than us. Like, have you ever driven past a car at night? You're driving like on the freeway or something, it's dark, not many cars out. You drive past a car and you look in the car and somebody in there looks so different than a human. I've seen this before. Or they look and you just go, it like hits you, right?
Yeah, I mean, you see a
You know
lot of
what I'm
that.
talking
You
about?
see a ton of that out in Ohio, for sure.
Yeah, exactly, right? Yeah. So this is the same thing with these types of constructs. We're, like I said, we're used to an intelligent being is only a human being. When you get another intelligent being that's coming up to you that is not an animal that you've never seen before, but it has this thing coming off of it that it's going to communicate with you, you're viscerally getting shocked by it because it's a very unexpected thing. And so I think that at least in part with some of these kids, they were masking their mind was masking some of this stuff and trying to also turn it into something that was recognizable for them within their own psyche construct.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because it's sort of how can your mind accept something that jarring, right?
Just wait. Once, if you ever like see a cryptid, or you ever see an alien and it comes up to you, for anyone out there who has experienced this, not in the subdued dreamlike state, but in a fully conscious state, as these kids mostly were, that fight or flight adrenaline thing is going to change aspects of it in your own mind so that you can cope with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the only reason why is because we are told, society tells us what is and what isn't, right? The only reason why, if people were at the very least told this was true, that there are these beings and these are this, there would be a lot less of this kind of stuff happening,
Oh, you're saying there would be less of them visiting if we were
There'd be
all
less
aware?
fear. There would be less fear.
Yeah, fear
And
and less of the
yeah.
bizarre, your mind changing things potentially, right?
Right.
Yeah, and so they're just talking about the agenda of these creatures. Their agenda seems to be protecting the natural resources of the earth so that they can steal some of them from time to time, including those of any kind of genetic value.
Well, I think it's important. I think it's important to be stewards because the earth is alive. I'm
Sure.
being very animistic here, but everything is alive. Everything is consciousness, and the way that we treat other things is the way we perceive ourselves, right? Is the way we literally just perceive ourselves. And so I think that's an important construct just in general, not to the degree of like what we've seen for a manipulation tactic by those in power, but by being very conscious and aware of our impacts, not just on the environment and earth around us, but on other individuals. Because the way that we put ourselves out and do things that can have a detrimental effect on things around us is literally how we perceive our own self and act with our own self. So I think it's an important message. I think whether it's for a manipulation or not, from their standpoint, I still think it is an important message. But it is so like, what is it, like a 1970s, 1980s message? Because,
it is. It's like I feel like Steven Spielberg's going to show up and be like,
I know, right? This gave rose to Greenpeace, didn't you know?
Yeah, right. Let's I don't know. It feels very ET to me,
Right. So that
Somehow.
they can steal stuff.
Yeah, basically.
Keep it clean for us kids.
Keep it clean so that we can keep extracting all of your natural resources. Yeah.
Well, it's either them or the powers that be here,
That's true. I mean, that is true. And I mean, word on the street is that some of those powers that be don't feel like they're necessarily human as well. So who knows, Or I don't know. It's hard to say. I mean, there's so much going back biblically, Uh, this world is so bizarre. I mean, when you talk about the strangeness and bizarre realities of the occult, technological alien beings, strange socio-political earth-killing agendas,
Right.
um, it's just a weird mashup that we have on this planet, and very, very little of it is being explored.
Right.
You know, yeah, very, very little. Some of these witnesses had claimed that they can now sense when they're back in the atmosphere. You know, I wonder how many people get this feeling, because people have they have sensibilities that they're not aware of. And I think, it's that same kind of feeling when you walk into the woods and you just feel like something's watching you. I can imagine, you know, feeling like that. Have you ever felt anything like that? I'm just curious. Like, you can kind of sense when something's going on. You're very sensitive to those things.
Yeah, that's why I live more or less away from large groups of people.
Yeah, the large groups of people are weirder to feel than even the alien beings.
Yeah, yeah. It's too much tumultuousness for me. Thoughts and feelings and stuff like that. People who are empathetic, and I believe everybody's empathetic to one degree or another. They will just take on the feelings of those around them
Yeah.
without even recognizing that they're not their own feelings, because people aren't taught to understand that, how to recognize what's theirs and someone else's.
Yeah.
You know, people aren't taught that at all. And so a lot of very empathetic people will just take on the feelings of those around them and think it's their own feelings.
Mm.
This is a very common theme for especially remote viewers, right?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yeah,
You've got to protect yourself, I think, in
right.
some
But not
ways.
just that. Like, you go into the forest, what you're talking about, and I've had times in the forest where it's like there's something, it's watching me, it's lurking. Now what's that? A bobcat or a cougar? I've had cougars stalk me before, and so you get this similar feeling from a cougar as you would probably a cryptid. But like, if you get the Bigfoot, for example, it's not just the feeling of being watched. The forest gets dark. Like, the forest gets dark. Like there's a perception thing that happens along with that, which doesn't happen with like a wild cat.
Yeah, I wonder if that's some kind of protective mechanism that they have in order to get you out of their territory, you
Yeah,
know?
it's weird, right? There's,
It
people have
is.
spoken of Bigfoot having this infrasonic capability, which would be a sound that you can't hear, that would affect your perception, your feeling and perception in that
Mm.
realm. Some people claim that Bigfoot is more paranormal. It can affect spaces like that.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Well, you guys, hopefully you enjoyed this episode on the Ariel School UFO encounter. We'd love to know what you guys think. Definitely leave a comment in our video. Let us know what you think, and if there's still something you're thirsting for information on regarding this. As far as I'm concerned, this is one of the most, if not the most, legitimate UFO encounter that we have documented across our history as human beings. And if you haven't checked out the Ariel phenomenon documentary, I highly recommend you checking that out and to understand this entire thing even better. And yeah, what do you guys think? Was this legit? Is what these kids saw accurate? We want to know what you guys think, and whether or not this was a a hoax that these kids carefully planned, or whether or not there's something even more out of this world going on. And with that, we'll end this episode here. We're going to have some bonus content revolved around this, where John and I are going to share a little bit more of our thoughts on a after hours episode out on the metaphysical.tv. Definitely go check that out if you'd like to support our work. And we love you guys. Thanks for watching us. And we hope you thought this episode was out of this world.